When I was 21, for my 21st birthday, someone gave me a silver hip flask engraved with my name. And that's a backhanded gift, isn't it? It's like saying, happy birthday, you look like someone who needs to drink alone in a public toilet. Brothers, sisters, comrades and friends, welcome to Bat Country. Over the course of my alcoholism, I had several experiences with hallucinations and delusions and psychosis and paranoia while I was withdrawing from alcohol. In fact, the name of this channel, Bat Country, comes from one of the most vivid hallucinations that I had in an experience with alcoholic hallucinosis, where I hallucinated bats in my room. But I saw a lot of weird things. I saw grotesque lizard-like animals and demonic characters around my bed and in my room. Dead, decaying women, shadowy characters, the Hat Man. And I saw weird, violent sexual imagery. I saw deformed and badly injured faces. So a cheery start to this video. But these hallucinations have fascinated me ever since I had them. And other people's experiences with them also fascinate me. I will always make time to listen to somebody's alcoholic hallucinosis or delirium tremens experience. In fact, I seek them out. I like to listen to other people's experiences and find similarities in what we saw. And those of us who have had them, who've been through those experiences, we often feel like you can't possibly understand what they're like unless you've experienced them yourself. Trying to explain an episode of alcoholic hallucinosis to someone who hasn't experienced it, it's a very alien feeling, because they're not like anything else. They're not like drug trips, not really. And they're utterly terrifying. That's the hardest thing to try to explain to somebody, is just how beyond fearful, beyond terror they are. They're profoundly terrifying. And the trauma that they leave you with lasts for a long time after the delusions and the hallucinations have faded away. So I spend a lot of time listening to and reading information about other people's experiences. I find them absolutely compelling. I find mine so confusing that I am compelled to try to understand them. Now, while some people turn to the big book for their sobriety information, or some people turn to the Bible or the Bhagavad Gita, whatever it is, I find myself increasingly turning to PubMed, dense medical papers and scientific journals for information about alcohol and its effects. I find myself reading quite a lot of very arcane medical literature. And all of those things are equal, like the medical literature and the big book and the Bible and the Bhagavad Gita. All of these things are equal. It's just that I find some of them are more equal than others. So one of my viewers, one of you fine people, emailed me a medical paper called Acute Alcoholic Hallucinosis, a Review. That's the title. I'll put the link to this paper in the description should you want to take a look at it yourself, so you can go and check all the sources that it's pulling from if you want. It's a review of all recent medical literature that in one way or another deals with alcoholic hallucinosis. And I found a really unusual bit of information buried deep in that paper about what the real biochemical processes are that actually cause the hallucinations in alcohol withdrawal. It kind of lit a fire in me, and it gave me the confidence that I needed to talk about something that I've been resisting talking about ever since I started this channel. I've resisted talking about it because I suspect it's going to alienate quite a significant portion of my audience. That's not intentional. I'm not deliberately trying to isolate people. But when I talk about this stuff and the things that I saw in alcoholic hallucinosis and delirium tremens, I tend to get a lot of comments from people trying to convince me that the hallucinations I had are spiritual in nature, or supernatural, or they're demonic visitations, or they're astral projections, or they're glimpses into other dimensions, or visions of another plane of reality, that kind of thing. I get a lot of that when I talk about my hallucinations. But the truth of that has always been that I don't feel like that. I don't agree that they're in any way supernatural. I never had the sense that I was peering behind the veil of reality or anything like that. That's never how it felt. It always felt to me like what I was seeing were manifestations of electrochemical processes in my brain. And now I think, thanks to this paper that I'm going to talk about in some detail today, I think I've found the evidence I need to kind of back that up, or at least to explain it. So this is, of course, all very subjective. I am talking about personal experience here. And I'm in no way intending to demean or diminish the experiences or the interpretations of other people who have gone through this and come to different conclusions. This is just my own interpretation, and all interpretations are equal. It's just that I feel like some interpretations are more equal than others. But if it does turn out, in the off chance that it is also interesting to you, please do like and subscribe and comment with your own experience and your own interpretation. But hang in there. As much as I think this is likely to be a boring video, which I may not ever publish, we are going to get to the interesting bit pretty soon, pretty quickly. So the hallucinations that we experience in alcohol withdrawal are so uniquely vivid, so uniquely terrifying, that afterwards a lot of us who talk to each other about them say things like, "I cannot believe that my mind was capable of coming up with that." I've said it myself. In a previous video, an old one about delirium tremens, I talked about how I hallucinated an hours-long musical about my own private anxiety about my fertility. It had identifiable characters, and the characters had arcs. There was character development. They all had their own little narratives. And everything that was spoken in this hallucination rhymed perfectly, like Shakespearean quality. And I remember another hallucination in which I was traveling at close to the speed of light, across the earth and then off into distant alien cities and that kind of thing. And my mind was generating the visuals in real time, like giving me what I felt was like a realistic depiction of traveling at relativistic speeds. And I knew that I was hallucinating when that was happening. And I just kind of let it happen. I just kind of studied it in awe at my own capacity for creativity, the sheer processing power of my brain that I had no idea it was capable of. I had no idea, and I had no idea also that I was capable of generating such gory and sexually violent images too. And I worried about what that said about my psyche for a long time. I worried about, like, where was it all coming from? How was my brain generating these images and these noises and so convincing dialogue happening around me and being able to construct music out of nothing? And like, was I being plugged into some subspace network, or was this stuff being transmitted into my brain? Was I astrally projecting? Was my soul somewhere out there in the cosmos while my body lay withdrawing from alcohol in bed? Were these past lives that I was conjuring up or recalling? And I privately wrestled with these questions for a long time. But none of the answers that I arrived at, like astral projection or past lives or demonic visitation, none of these felt right. None of these answers were satisfying. But this paper does provide an answer which I do find satisfying. So I'm going to read you a little bit of dense medical language from this paper, but then I'm going to break it down to translate it as best as I can. So just indulge me for a second while we go back to the paper. Okay, this is the relevant bit. Published studies have suggested several neurobiological mechanisms that may account for the occurrence of hallucinations in patients with alcohol dependence. They include dysfunction of the dopaminergic system, dysfunction of the serotonergic system, decrease in the concentration of inhibitory neurotransmitter amino acids, and increase in concentration of excitatory glutamine, asparagine neurotransmitter amino acids, changes in beta-carboline activity rates, and possible damages of auditory and sensory conducting pathways. Just pausing there for a moment. There's something in there that I'd never heard of before. I knew all about the glutamate and GABA and, neurotransmitters and amino acids and all of that stuff. I'd never heard of beta-carboline activity rates. That got my attention. And I wonder if there are some of you who are watching this who do know what that is and are already jumping ahead. So then the paper goes through all of those things I just mentioned one by one, all of the mesolimbic pathways and cerebrospinal fluid and decreased glutamate and blah, blah, blah. I'm just going to skip over that and return to what it says about beta-carboline activity. This is what the paper mentions about that particular chemical compound. Since plant extracts containing beta-carboline can cause hallucinations, the increased plasma levels of beta-carboline detected in patients with acute alcoholic hallucinosis may have potential pathogenetic significance. You can see why that got my attention, right? So let's talk about beta-carbolines for a moment. What are they? Since they're completely new to me, I'd never heard of them before I started reading this paper, there's a chance that they might be new to you too. This explains so much. For me, it answers so many questions that I had about my own experiences with alcohol-induced hallucinations. Beta-carbolines are a group of naturally occurring chemical compounds. They occur in trace amounts in our bodies and in some plants, most notably those used in the production of ayahuasca. What beta-carbolines do is they act on the benzodiazepine receptor sites of your GABA-A receptors, essentially the same function as ayahuasca. They're known as inverse agonists because instead of enhancing your GABA's soothing effects, they block it. And that just pushes your brain into overdrive. And it's weird that I'd never heard of this, considering how much reading I do about this. It is unusual that I'd never heard about this because it makes perfect sense. This might explain why, during alcohol withdrawal, when GABA is already low, higher levels of beta-carbolines can kind of supercharge the chaos, can kind of invoke the hallucinations. And the study that I've just been reading from, all of the patients in them had elevated beta-carboline levels in patients experiencing acute alcohol hallucinosis. And that suggests pretty unequivocally to me that these compounds are creating the hallucinations themselves. And it's not me spinning off the top of my head here. This isn't tinfoil hat time. A lot of the researchers of that paper and others that they're quoting draw parallels between this effect of the beta-carbolines inducing hallucinations during alcohol withdrawal with the effects of the hallucinogenic plants like those used in shamanic rituals. That's why these hallucinations feel supernatural. Because during withdrawal, your brain is dosing itself with its own brand of hallucinogen. We're not puncturing through to other planes of reality or being visited by demons. As weird as these hallucinations are to experience, they are all explainable and they are comprehensible. The mechanics of them are comprehensible. But I feel like that's not enough. Because if you're of the sort who believes that a shaman really truly is transcending their physical body when they're ingesting hallucinogens, like they're really truly communing with ancestors or animal spirits and that kind of thing, then nothing changes for you. This information doesn't challenge that belief. It's just those are not my beliefs. I don't believe that shamans are communing with spirits and that kind of thing. My beliefs have been all along that this is a process very much bound by chemical properties and physical laws. This is a neurochemical process and not a metaphysical one. For me, it's not a spiritual experience. It's a process of chaotic neuroscience. And that is every bit as beautiful as it being a spiritual experience. However, this explanation does leave questions hanging, doesn't it? If you're coming to this from a religious perspective, and I'm trying to convince you that there is a scientific basis for all of this, for these hallucinatory experiences, you might be right to question me and ask me a very difficult question, which is this. If it's just neurochemical reactions, why do so many people from so many different cultural contexts and from so many different demographics tend to hallucinate the same things? Isn't that indicative of some kind of divine order in the chaos? Doesn't that imply that we are all connected to some kind of shared consciousness?